In the shimmering glow of the Sara's twin moons, Daniel Cross stirred from a restless sleep in his modest diplomatic quarters. The planet's humid air clung to his skin like a second layer, a constant reminder that he was far from Earth's familiar chill. As a mid-level diplomat assigned to foster alliances between humanity and the Thessarian Empire, Daniel had grown accustomed to the alien world's peculiarities, that iridescent flora that hummed softly at night, the distant calls of winged creatures soaring through the violet skies, and the intricate web of political intrigue that defined every interaction. But nothing could have prepared him for the soft chime at his door in the dead of night, a sound that pierced the silence like a whisper from another realm. He rubbed his eyes, glancing at the holographic clock projecting 3:17 a.m. local time. Who could it be? Security breaches were rare in the fortified embassy compound, guarded by both human sentinels and Thessarian enforcers. Daniel slipped on a robe, his heart pounding with a mix of curiosity and caution. Activating the door's viewer, he froze. There, standing in the dim corridor, was Princess Kasara, heir to the Thessarian throne. Her elegant form was shrouded in a simple cloak, devoid of the regal armor and entourage that usually accompanied her. Her skin, a canvas of shifting patterns typical of her species, swirled with erratic bursts of crimson and indigo colors Daniel had learned signified deep distress. "Princess," he whispered through the intercom, his voice laced with disbelief. "Is everything all right?" Her luminous eyes, glowing faintly like embers in the dark, met the camera. "Daniel Cross, human. May I stay with you tonight?" Her words were soft, almost pleading, carrying the melodic lilt of her native tongue translated flawlessly by his implant. Daniel's mind raced. This was no ordinary request. Kasara was not just royalty. She was the linchpin of the fragile peace negotiations between their worlds. Rumors swirled about her intelligence, her grace, but also her vulnerability under the weight of expectation. To harbor her could mean diplomatic disaster, or worse, accusations of impropriety. Yet, something in her gaze tugged at him, a raw honesty that transcended species. He hesitated only a moment before disengaging the lock. The door slid open with a hiss, and she stepped inside, her cloak brushing against the threshold like a secret unfolding. As she entered, the room seemed to brighten, her presence illuminating the sparse furnishings, a low bed, a desk cluttered with data pads, and a window overlooking the sprawling city of Illyria, where spires twisted like living vines toward the stars. Kasara lowered her hood, revealing her cascading tendrils of hair that shimmered like liquid silver. Up close, she was even more striking than in the formal halls, her features delicate yet strong, her skin now settling into softer hues of lavender, perhaps a sign of tentative relief. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice barely above a breath. I needed a place where no one expects me to be perfect." Daniel gestured to a chair, trying to mask his nervousness. "Of course, Your Highness. But why me? Why not your guards or advisors?" She sank into the seat, her posture uncharacteristically slumped. "Because they see me as the crown, not as Kasara. The nobles whisper of my inexperience. The advisors critique every word I utter in the alliance talks. Tonight, the pressure, it became unbearable. I slipped away, using a hidden passage in the palace. You, Daniel, you're human, an outsider like me in many ways. I've watched you in the negotiations. You listen without judgment." He poured her a glass of water from a replicator, his hands steady despite the whirlwind in his chest. As he handed it to her, their fingers brushed a fleeting contact that sent a spark through him, unfamiliar yet intriguing. Her skin was warm, textured like fine silk under the patterns. "I'm honored, but this is risky. If anyone finds out." "I know," she admitted, sipping the water. Her eyes met his, holding a depth that drew him in. "But for once, I want to be vulnerable. Tell me about Earth, Daniel. What makes a human feel alive?" They talked as the moons traversed the sky. Daniel shared stories of his homeworld, the vast oceans that crashed against rocky shores, the bustling cities alive with diverse voices, and his own journey into diplomacy, driven by a loss that left him seeking connection across stars. Kasara listened intently, her skin patterns shifting to warm golds and ambers, tones of fascination and comfort. In return, she opened up about the Sara's hidden wonders, the crystal caverns that sang harmonies when the wind blew, the ancient rituals where her people communed with ancestral spirits. and the loneliness of being groomed for a throne since birth. "I've never had a friend," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Only subjects and schemers." As dawn's first light filtered through the window, tinting the room in hues of rose and sapphire, Daniel felt a pull toward her, a budding admiration laced with something deeper, more electric. He had always been pragmatic, focused on protocols, but Kasara's candor cracked his defenses. "You can come back," he said impulsively, "if you need to." Her smile was radiant, her skin blooming with a soft pink he hadn't seen before, perhaps affection. "I might take you up on that, human." The next night, the chime came again. Daniel was ready this time, his quarters tittied, a pot of the Syrian tea brewing its aroma floral and soothing, a blend he'd learned she favored from observing her at banquets. Kasara arrived, her cloak discarded sooner, revealing a simple gown that accentuated her graceful form. They settled on the floor cushions, a more intimate setting, their knees nearly touching. Conversation flowed easier, delving into personal fears. She spoke of the noble Lord Virak, a war-hardened veteran who opposed the human alliance, viewing it as a dilution of Thessarian purity. "He undermines me at every turn," she said, her hand clenching. Daniel reached out, covering it with his own, a bold move that made her patterns still, then swirl with a mesmerizing blend of blue and gold. "You're stronger than they know," he assured her, feeling the warmth of her skin against his palm. The touch lingered, a silent promise building between them. Nights blurred into a secret ritual. Kasara's visits became the highlight of Daniel's existence on this alien world. He began anticipating her arrival, preparing small surprises, a holographic display of Earth's auras, or a sample of human music that made her tendrils sway in rhythm. In turn, she shared the Syrian artifacts, a small orb that projected illusions of starry nebulae, under which they lay side by side, shoulders brushing, whispering dreams. One evening, as rain pattered against the window, the Sara's storms electric with lightning that danced like fireflies, Kasara leaned closer. "Daniel, do humans feel this connection, this pull toward another?" He turned to her, their faces inches apart. Her eyes reflected the storm's glow, inviting. "Yes," he whispered. "It's called attraction, romance." Her patterns flushed a deep crimson, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she traced a finger along his arm, exploring the differences in their forms. "Show me more." Their conversations turned flirtatious, laced with gentle touches and shared laughter. Daniel taught her human customs, like stargazing while holding hands, and she reciprocated with the Syrian dances, her body moving with ethereal grace that left him breathless. The romance blossomed subtly, a stolen glance, a lingering embrace when she arrived or departed. Yet, beneath the allure, their bond deepened through vulnerability. Kasara revealed the scars of her upbringing, isolated training sessions where failure meant exile, simulations, forging her into a leader, but shattering her spirit. Daniel shared his own wounds, the loss of his family in a colonial accident, driving him to bridge worlds to prevent such tragedies. One night, as they sat entwined on the bed, watching the city lights flicker, Kasara's head rested on his shoulder. "You've become my sanctuary, Daniel. In your arms, I forget the crown." He kissed her forehead softly, a human gesture that made her sigh. "And you've awakened something in me, Kasara, a hope for more than just peace treaties." But shadows loomed. Whispers in the embassy corridors hinted at surveillance. Daniel noticed tales during his daily routines, subtle Assyrian agents lingering too long. Lord Virak's influence grew, his speeches railing against human contamination. During a negotiation session, Virak's eyes bored into Daniel, a warning clear. That night, Kasara arrived tense, her patterns erratic. "He's suspicious. We must be careful." They devised codes, official cultural exchange logs to mask their meetings. Daniel hacked minor embassy systems to loop security feeds, adding a thrill of adventure to their romance. The danger heightened the intensity. Each visit felt stolen, precious. Under the guise of diplomacy, they explored each other's worlds more intimately. Kasara introduced him to the Syrian cuisine via smuggled delicacies, fruits that burst with flavors evoking emotions, one inducing euphoria that led to their first true kiss, lips meeting in a fusion of warmth and wonder. As the chapter of their secret beginnings unfolded, Daniel realized this was no mere fling. Kasara wasn't just an alien princess. She was his counterpart, a soul echoing his own across the cosmos. Their romance, woven with threads of risk and revelation, promised adventures beyond imagination. Yet, as the twin moons set on another night, he couldn't shake the feeling that their idyll was fragile, a spark in a gathering storm. The electric rain of the Sara continued for 3 consecutive nights, turning the capital of Illyria into a glittering labyrinth of neon reflections and crackling thunder. Each bolt illuminated the spires in stark white, revealing the intricate carvings of ancient Thessarian heroes, etched into the living crystal architecture. Inside Daniel's quarters, however, the storm felt distant, muted by the soft hum of the environmental shields and the quiet rhythm of 2 hearts beating closer with every passing hour. Cassara arrived later than usual on the second night of the deluge, her cloak dripping luminous droplets that evaporated before they could pool on the floor. She looked both exhilarated and exhausted, tendrils of silver hair clinging wetly to her neck and shoulders. The moment the door sealed behind her, she let the cloak fall away completely. Beneath it she wore a sleeveless garment of deep midnight blue, the fabric so thin it seemed woven from starlight itself. The material shifted subtly with her breathing, catching stray flashes of lightning and scattering them across the walls. Like captured constellations, Daniel had already dimmed the main lights, leaving only the soft amber glow of a single floating orb and the occasional flare from the storm. Outside, he met her halfway across the room without a word, taking both her hands in his. Her fingers were cool from the rain, but they warmed almost instantly against his skin. "You're shivering," he murmured. "Not from cold," she answered, voice low. Her patterns were swirling faster than he had ever seen, deep violets bleeding into molten gold at the edges, then fracturing into tiny sparks of silver. From everything else, he led her to the wide window seat that overlooked the storm-lashed gardens. They sat side by side, thighs touching, watching lightning fork between the towering spires. For long minutes neither spoke. The silence between them felt alive, electric in its own right. Finally Cassara turned her face toward him. Rain traced erratic paths down the transparent pane, distorting her reflection so that for a heartbeat she appeared to have twin sets of glowing eyes. "Lord Virak called an emergency conclave this afternoon," she said quietly. He presented evidence, grainy surveillance stills of a cloaked figure moving through the lower palace corridors after curfew. He didn't name me, but the implication was unmistakable. "The nobles are restless. Some are already whispering that the human alliance weakens our bloodline, that I am compromised." Daniel felt ice slide down his spine. "Did anyone see your face?" "No. I was careful. But Virak is clever. He doesn't need proof, he needs doubt. And doubt is spreading like rotten wet wood." She leaned her head against his shoulder. The contact was so natural now that neither of them questioned it anymore. Daniel slipped an arm around her waist, fingers splaying across the impossibly soft fabric at the small of her back. He could feel the subtle vibration beneath her skin, the Thessarian equivalent of a racing pulse. "I won't let them take this from us," he said, surprised by the steel in his own voice. Cassara lifted her head, studying him with those luminous eyes. "You say that as though you could fight an entire court single-handed. Maybe I can't, but I can fight for you, and I will." Something shifted in her expression, something tender and fierce at once. She reached up and traced the line of his jaw with one fingertip, following the unfamiliar human stubble that had begun to shadow his skin since he stopped shaving every morning. The touch was reverent. "No one has ever said those words to me," she whispered. "Not like that, not meaning them." Daniel caught her hand and pressed his lips to the center of her palm. Her skin tasted faintly of ozone and night-blooming flowers. When he looked up again, her patterns had steadied into a slow, hypnotic pulse of rose and amber. "Kiss me properly this time," she said. It wasn't a command, it was an invitation wrapped in quiet courage. He didn't hesitate. Their second kiss was nothing like the first tentative brush beneath the euphoria fruit. This one was deliberate, hungry, built from nights of stolen glances and almost touches. Daniel cupped her face with both hands, thumbs brushing the delicate ridges along her cheekbones. Cassara made a soft sound against his, mouth half sigh, half plea, and parted her lips. The differences between them should have been awkward, the slight texture of her tongue, the way her breath carried the sweet aftertaste of star anise tea, the faint bioluminescent glow that brightened whenever their tongues met. Instead, every contrast felt like discovery. She tasted like possibility, like home he hadn't known he was missing. When they finally drew apart, both breathing hard, Kasara rested her forehead against his. "I have never felt this unguarded," she confessed. "With anyone, neither have I." They stayed like that for a while, foreheads touching, breathing each other's air. Outside, the storm reached a crescendo, thunder rolling so deep it vibrated through the floor. Lightning turned the room stark white for fractions of a second, freezing their entwined silhouettes against the glass. Eventually, Kasara pulled back just enough to look at him fully. "There is something I want to show you," she said. "Something no outsider has ever seen." She rose and crossed to the small table, where she had left a slender obsidian case the night before. From it she withdrew a palm-sized crystal sphere, perfectly smooth and faintly warm to the touch. When she cradled it between both hands, the interior began to glow a gentle violet light that gradually resolved into moving images. It was a memory projection, one of the most sacred Thessarian arts. The scene that unfolded was intimate, almost painfully so. A much younger Kasara, no more than 16 cycles, standing alone on a high balcony of the palace at twilight. Twin moons hung low and huge. She was practicing a ceremonial dance, movements precise yet hesitant, as though she feared the steps themselves might judge her. Every time she faltered, she stopped, closed her eyes, and began again. There was no music, only the whisper of wind through crystal chimes. The memory Kasara danced until exhaustion claimed her. She sank to her knees, head bowed, shoulders shaking not with sobs, but with the effort of holding everything inside. The sphere held the moment perfectly, one tear sliding down her cheek, catching moonlight and refracting it into a tiny rainbow before it fell. The projection faded. Kasara closed her fingers around the sphere until the light died. "That was the night I decided I would never let anyone see me weak again," she said softly. "Until you." Daniel felt something crack open inside his chest, something he had kept locked away since the day he buried the last of his family. He stood and crossed to her into strides. Without asking permission, he gathered her into his arms, holding her the way he wished someone had held him all those years ago. She stiffened for only a heartbeat before melting against him, face pressed to the curve of his neck. They stayed like that until the storm began to quiet. When she finally spoke again, her voice was muffled against his skin. "Stay with me tonight, not just for an hour, all night." Daniel pulled back far enough to meet her eyes. "Are you sure?" "Yes." A small, almost shy smile curved her lips. "I want to fall asleep listening to your heartbeat. I want to wake up and find you still here." He kissed her again slowly this time, savoring every second. They moved to the bed together, shedding the last barriers of clothing with careful hands and murmured reassurances. There was no rush, no frantic need to claim, only wonder. Daniel learned the map of her body the way he had once learned star charts, reverently, memorizing every ridge and hollow, every place that made her breath hitch or her patterns flare bright. Kasara explored him with equal curiosity, fingers tracing the smooth planes of his chest, the line of his collarbone, the pulse at the base of his throat. When they finally joined, it was gentle, almost ceremonial. Their bodies moved together in a slow, instinctive rhythm that felt older than either of their species. Kasara's patterns cascaded across her skin in waves of color, crimson to gold to palest violet, like an aurora trapped beneath her flesh. Daniel buried his face against her neck and whispered her name like a prayer. Afterward they lay tangled together beneath a single thin sheet, her head pillowed on his chest, one leg thrown possessively over his. The storm had passed, only soft rain tapped against the window now. Kasara traced idle patterns across his sternum with one fingertip. "Tomorrow the conclave votes on whether to suspend the human negotiations," she murmured. "Virak will push for severance, if he wins. Then we fight smarter," Daniel said, kissing the top of her head. "We don't give them the satisfaction of seeing us run." She lifted her head, eyes shining. "You would risk everything? Your career, your safety, for you." He tucked a strand of silver hair behind the delicate point of her ear. In a heartbeat, Kasara smiled a real smile, unguarded and radiant. "Then we fight," she agreed. Outside, the twin moons broke through the thinning clouds, bathing the room in silver light. Daniel pulled her closer, feeling for the first time in years that the universe might actually be kind. But in the back of his mind, a small, cold voice reminded him kindness was rarely permanent on the Sara, and storms, he knew, had a way of returning. The vote in the Grand Conclave came at dawn on the fourth day after the great storm passed. Illyria's central dome shimmered under a pale lavender sky, its crystal lattice refracting the first rays into thousands of tiny rainbows that danced across the assembled nobles. Daniel watched from the human delegation's elevated gallery, hands clasped so tightly behind his back that his knuckles ached. He wore his formal diplomatic tunic charcoal gray trimmed in silver, but beneath it his heart hammered like a war drum. Below, on the concentric tiers of polished obsidian, the Thessarian court had gathered in full regalia. Robes of woven light thread shifted colors with every breath. Guards stood motionless, their ceremonial spears tipped with faintly glowing plasma. At the center dais sat Kasara, regal and composed, her skin patterns locked into a serene silver blue that betrayed nothing of the nights they had shared. Only Daniel knew how hard she was working to keep that mask in place. Lord Virek rose first to speak. His voice carried without amplification, deep and resonant, honed by decades of command. Esteemed council, heirs of the first bloom, we stand at a precipice. For cycles we have extended tentative tendrils toward these humans, creatures of short lives and reckless ambition. We offered alliance in the name of mutual survival against the void's greater threats. Yet what have we reaped? Dilution, doubt, whispers that our heir apparent has been influenced. A murmur rippled through the tiers. Daniel felt eyes flick toward the human gallery. He kept his expression neutral, though every instinct screamed to stand, to shout the truth that Kasara's heart was not weakened but awakened. Virek continued, gesturing toward a hovering holoprojector. Grainy images flickered into view, a cloaked figure slipping through shadowed corridors, hood drawn low. Another angle showed the same figure pausing outside the human embassy wing. The timestamp matched one of Kasara's late-night visits. The evidence speaks, Virek declared. Our princess has been meeting with the human diplomat in secret, not for policy, not for negotiation, but for personal indulgence. If the heir to the throne cannot control her own desires, how can she lead an empire? Gasps hushed outrage. A few nobles nodded grimly, others looked uncertain, glancing toward Kasara. She rose slowly. When she spoke, her voice was calm steel. Lord Virek mistakes caution for conspiracy and privacy for shame. Yes, I have met with Daniel Cross outside formal channels, not to betray our people, but to understand them. True alliance is not forged in sterile halls with scripted words. It is built in honest conversation, in shared vulnerability. If that is a crime, then judge me, but do not pretend it weakens us. She turned her gaze across the dome, meeting every pair of eyes she could. I have learned more about humanity in those quiet hours than in 100 diplomatic briefings. Their capacity for empathy, their stubborn hope, their willingness to risk everything for what they believe is right. If we sever ties now, we do not protect our purity, we isolate ourselves from the very qualities that might save us when the next void storm comes. Silence followed her words, thick and heavy. Virek's patterns flared angry crimson. Pretty words, Highness, but the law is clear. Personal entanglement with a foreign national during active negotiations is grounds for suspension of diplomatic status and, if proven compromising, removal from the line of succession. He raised one clawed hand. I move that we suspend all human Thessarian talks, pending a full inquiry, and that Princess Kasara be confined to the palace until the matter is resolved. Seconded. Third Ed. Voices rose in chaotic support and opposition. Kasara remained standing, chin high, but Daniel could see the faint tremor in her fingers where they gripped the edge of the dais. The vote was called. Hands rose in tears, gold light for aye, violet for nay. It was agonizingly close. When the final tally appeared in shimmering numerals above the dome, the chamber erupted. Suspension passed by 7 votes. Kasara's confinement was ordered to begin immediately. Guards moved toward her. Daniel felt the gallery railing bite into his palms. He wanted to vault over it, to stand between her and them, but that would only confirm every accusation Virek had made. Instead, he caught her eye across the vast space. She gave him the smallest, bravest nod, then allowed the guards to escort her from the dais with all the dignity of her rank. The human delegation was dismissed shortly afterward. Daniel returned to his quarters in a numb haze, the corridors feeling colder and longer than ever. He did not expect the chime that night, yet at 2:41 a.m. it came soft, almost hesitant. He opened the door to find Kasara standing there alone, no cloak, no escort, just her in a plain gray robe that made her look impossibly young. How he began. She stepped inside quickly, and the door sealed. "I know passages even the guards have forgotten," she said, voice low. "And I needed to see you, tonight, before they locked down every hidden way." Daniel pulled her into his arms without another word. She clung to him fiercely, face buried against his chest. For the first time since he had known her, she trembled. "They're sending me to the summer spire at first light," she whispered. "Isolated. No visitors. No comms. Viric's allies will use the time to consolidate power, to paint me as unfit. When I return, if I return, the succession may already be decided." Daniel cupped her face, thumbs brushing away the moisture gathering beneath her eyes. Her patterns were chaotic, fractured streaks of gray and black threading through the silver. "Then we don't let them win," he said. She gave a broken little laugh. "How? I'll be a prisoner in all but name. We planned out, we move. We find allies who still believe in you." He kissed her forehead, then her lips, soft at first, then deeper, pouring every ounce of certainty he felt into the contact. "And if we have to burn the whole rotten court down to keep you free, we will." Kasara searched his eyes for a long moment. Then she nodded. They spent the remaining hours of darkness and fierce, focused conspiracy. She sketched maps on his data pad, forgotten tunnels beneath the palace, maintenance conduits that linked to the outer city, ancient escape routes used during the Void Wars centuries ago. Daniel cross-referenced them against embassy security logs he had quietly duplicated over the weeks. Together they identified a narrow window, 3 nights from now, during the Festival of Twin Ascendants, when security would be stretched thin by public celebrations and fireworks. If she could slip her guards during the pre-dawn procession, if he could meet her at the old crystal viaduct on the city's edge, if they could reach the unregistered shuttle pad hidden in the western canyons, they could disappear long enough to rally loyal houses, expose Viric's manipulations, and force a new vote. It was desperate, reckless, beautiful. When the first hints of dawn bled through the window, Kasara stood and pulled him up with her. "I have to go," she said regretfully. "They'll notice my absence soon." Daniel caught her wrist. "One more thing." He reached into the drawer beside the bed and withdrew a small pendant. He had replicated days earlier a human design, a simple silver chain holding a tiny sphere of earth-ocean glass, deep turquoise shot through with gold. He had programmed it with a microtransmitter keyed to his personal frequency. "Wear this under your robes," he told her. "It's shielded. Viric's scanners won't detect it. If you're ever in real danger, press the center. I'll know. I'll come for you." Kasara's fingers closed around the pendant. She slipped the chain over her head, letting the glass sphere settle between her hearts. Then she kissed him slow, searing, a promise sealed in heat and salt and starlight. "I love you," she whispered against his mouth. The words landed like a supernova in his chest. He framed her face with both hands. "I love you too, wherever you are, whatever happens." She smiled small, fierce, radiant tan slipped out into the corridor. The door closed. Daniel stood alone in the sudden silence, the taste of her still on his lips, the weight of her words echoing in every heartbeat. Outside, the twin moons were setting. The Festival of Twin Ascendants would begin in 3 days. 3 days to turn the tide. 3 days to steal back their future. He sat at his desk, opened the encrypted files, and began to plan. The Festival of Twin Ascendants arrived like a fever dream over Illyria. Streets that usually lay quiet under the violet dusk now blazed with living light, thousands of crystal lanterns drifting upward on thermal currents, each one carrying a whispered wish from the people below. Fireworks of ionized plasma burst in synchronized patterns that mimicked the ancient constellations of the Sara's first bloom. Music poured from every spire, deep resonant chimes layered with ethereal vocal harmonies that made the air itself vibrate. Crowds surged through the boulevards in ceremonial robes, faces painted with bioluminescent swirls, celebrating the night when the twin moons aligned perfectly, and legend said the veil between worlds grew thin. Daniel moved through the chaos disguised as one of the festival acolytes' gray cloak, face half hidden by a hood embroidered with silver crescent moons. The pendant he had given Kasara was warm against his chest. Its microtransmitter had pulsed twice in the last hour, once sharp and urgent, once longer and steady. The code they'd agreed on. First pulse, I'm free of my guards. Second, I'm coming to the viaduct. He reached the old crystal viaduct on the city's western edge just as the main procession fireworks reached their crescendo. The structure arched over a deep ravine, its translucent spans grown from living quartz centuries ago, now glowing faintly under the double moonlight. No guards patrolled here tonight. Everyone was drawn to the central plaza. Daniel crouched in the shadow of a support pillar, heart slamming against his ribs. Then he saw her. Kasara emerged from the far end of the viaduct like a vision stepping out of myth. She wore the simple gray robe of a pilgrim, but even in disguise her grace was unmistakable. Silver tendrils spilled from beneath the hood, catching moonlight. She moved quickly, purposefully, glancing once over her shoulder before breaking into a run. Daniel stepped out. Their eyes met across the span. She didn't slow. She flew toward him. They collided in the middle of the bridge, arms locking, mouths finding each other in a kiss that tasted of desperation, relief, starlight, and salt. Her patterns exploded across her skin in radiant cascades, molten gold threaded with rose, and deepest indigo, brighter than he had ever seen. He lifted her off her feet for a heartbeat, spinning her once before setting her down again, both of them laughing breathlessly against each other's lips. "You made it," he whispered, forehead pressed to hers. "I told you I would." Her fingers dug into his shoulders. They locked the summer spire tighter than a void vault, but I know every crack in that palace. I waited until the procession passed beneath my window, then climbed down the outer lattice. No one saw. He cupped her face. "The shuttle is fueled and cloaked in the canyon. We have maybe 20 minutes before anyone realizes you're gone." Kasara nodded, but instead of moving she pulled him closer, kissing him again, slower this time, savoring. When she drew back, her eyes were luminous, wet with something fiercer than tears. "I don't want to run forever, Daniel. I want to fight for my place, for us. But tonight I just want to be yours, completely. No crowns, no courts, just us." He understood. They didn't speak again until they reached the hidden shuttle pad tucked between canyon walls. The craft was small, civilian grade, unregistered, procured through a discreet contact in the human merchant quarter who owed Daniel a very large favor. Its hull shimmered with adaptive camouflage, blending seamlessly with the rock until the moment the hatch opened. Inside, the cabin was dimly lit, furnished with only a pilot's couch, a narrow bunk, and a viewport that stretched across the entire forward wall. Daniel sealed the hatch, powered up the stealth systems, and eased the shuttle into a silent hover. They rose above the canyon rim just as the festival's grand finale lit the sky 1,000 lanterns, converging into the shape of twin blooming flowers that slowly rotated above the city. Kasara stood at the viewport, watching her home recede. Daniel came up behind her, arms sliding around her waist. She leaned back against his chest, head resting on his shoulder. "It's beautiful," she murmured, "even when it hurts." He kissed the sensitive point behind her ear. "We'll come back when it's safe, when it's ours." She turned in his arms. "Promise me something, anything. When we win, when I take the throne properly, with you beside me, we build something new. A court where vulnerability isn't weakness, where love isn't scandal, where human and Thessarian can stand together without fear." Daniel smiled against her temple. "I promise." They kissed again, deeper now, hands roaming with the certainty of people who had almost lost everything. Clothes fell away slowly, reverently. The shuttle drifted higher, leaving the festival lights far below until only stars and the twin moons remained. They made love on the narrow bunk, with the viewport open to the cosmos, slowly at first, then urgently, then slowly again. Her patterns washed over both of them in waves of color, bathing his skin in living light. Every touch felt like a vow, every sigh a shared secret. When they finally stilled, tangled and breathless, the universe seemed to hold its breath with them. Afterward, Kasara traced the lines of his face with one fingertip, memorizing him by starlight. "I never believed in fate," she said softly. "Not until you opened that door." Daniel caught her hand. and kissed her palm. I didn't believe in miracles, not until you asked to stay. She smiled small, radiant, unguarded. They talked for hours as the shuttle slipped into a high orbit, far enough from the Sara that no pursuit could reach them before dawn. They planned which noble houses still supported her in secret, which human ambassadors could be trusted to broker asylum, how to leak Virek's forged evidence to the public forums. They laughed about the absurdity of a human diplomat and a Thessarian princess becoming fugitives together. They dreamed about a future house on the cliffs of Illyria's western sea, where the moons would rise over water instead of spires, and no one would care what species they belonged to. As the first edge of the Sara's dawn glow touched the horizon, Kasara pressed the pendant against her hearts. "I'm ready," she said. Daniel activated the calm ray and sent the pre-recorded packet they had prepared together. Every piece of proof they had gathered: altered security logs, showing Virek's agents planting false trails, recordings of his private counsels plotting to discredit her, testimonies from loyal retainers who had risked everything to speak. The packet would flood every open channel on the Sara at once. No cover-up could contain it. Then he opened a private channel to the human embassy. "This is Daniel Cross," he said clearly. "I am with Princess Kasara. We are safe. We are asking for sanctuary under the terms of the Provisional Alliance, and we are asking the people of both worlds to listen." He cut the transmission. Kasara took his hand. Together they watched the sunrise spill across the curve of their shared planet, violet and rose and gold, colors that now belonged to both of them. No chase ships appeared on the sensors. No demands for surrender echoed across the comms. Instead, the public channels began to light up, first with outrage, then with questions, then with growing calls for justice. House after house issued statements of support. The festival lanterns, still floating above Illyria, began to rearrange themselves into new patterns. A single blooming flower, petals open to the dawn. Kasara turned to him, eyes shining. "They're listening," she whispered. Daniel pulled her close. "Then let's go home," he said. Together, the shuttle banked gently, descending toward the only future worth fighting for. And somewhere below, in the heart of a city waking to revolution, two worlds began slowly, beautifully to become one.
Como me gusta.
Ándale. No puedo moverle mucho la cámara, pero guáchense.
En las convenciones que he ido no permiten que se promocionen, pero a la gente les valía madre y todos los cosplay repartiendo su propaganda, jaja.
No, pero esta es parte de la rave de la convención, güey. Me veo divina. Mira, güey, otro vato vestido de maid, güey, huevo. Güey, yo quiero uno de esos trajes, güey.
Ponte las orejas, güey.
Mira,
güey.
Mira, güey. Mira, güey. What's up, man? Güey.
Te ves muy bonito.
Gracias. Gracias, güey. Me veo bien divina.
A huevo, jajajaja.
Güey, no soy el único pendejo, güey. Bacto, qué guapo. A huevo. ¿Cómo? Ya me siento más.
Te faltó la peluca.
No pasa, güey, no tiene peluca.
Conductor de Uber disfrazado de nalgotica.
Eso es el sábado, güey. El sábado nos ponemos este mismo vestido para manejar el Uber, güey. ¿Cómo andas, güey? ¿No vas a ser directo hoy o qué, pa? Mira, güey. Son las 12 ya, güey.
Yo nomás diré que él si trae sus orejas puestas ahí la dejo.
¿Sí tienen las puestas orejas? Ahorita las pongo, güey. Ahorita.
Sí, pero fui por mi hija al colegio.
Va. Le voy a echar el paro para que entre. Bate.
Llegó Ari Gameplay.
A la verga. There's a medical. Hay una emergencia médica en mis huevos que. Sí, ya lo había hecho el vato. Vente, güey. Contra el güey. Ay, güey. Se
Una
pasaron de
emergencia
verdad.
médica y eso que todavía no entra.
Te digo. O sea, la fila empieza aquí, güey. Y va toda la puta vuelta otra vez, güey. Vete a la verga, güey. Mira una Amber, el Genshin. Qué buen cosplay. Me tocó ir por mi hija al colegio y todavía almorzar antes de salir. Será más turno nocturno. Ah, ok. Va. Yo a lo mejor al rato también trabajo, no sé.
¿Dónde están las waifus de Bayonetta?
Adentro, güey. ¿Qué es eso, baloneta?
Qué rica se ve esa Amber.
Sí. Ah, qué rica, dije bonita, verga. Verga.
Voltea la cámara atrás, a ver qué tanto está la fila.
Aquí empieza la fila, o tienes que dar toda la vuelta para acá, güey.
Busca Bayonetta en Google y se parte de su culto.
Para allá, y todos tienen que rodear todo, güey. Eso está larga la fila, güey. O sea, ¿crees que esta gente está formada porque quiere? No, güey, tienen que dar la vuelta completa, güey. Tienen que dar toda la
No
puta vuelta, güey.
sabemos qué tiempo llevas y ya se duplicó.
Sí, güey. Pues llevamos como media hora aquí parados, ¿no? Yo creo.
But he said they drug test him. Yeah, so he should be fine.
Yeah, he should be fine.
There's no point in spending money on a drug test being fired. Yeah.
Acá vas a ver, güey.
Te rogamos Dios que hoy Gerard detone una waifu. Igual avanzaste harto.
Pues sí, algo salgo ya, güey. Ya mero.
That's what I'm saying. He already. And I told him too. I go, if you're old enough to swing it, he's like, okay, I don't want to do it. Yeah. Those are lots of them. I can see if it was you, I'd be like, I don't want to go.
Algo salgo.
¿Cómo es que conoces de Genesis?
De Genshin, porque antes lo jugué, güey. Ya va para los 2 años que no lo juego, pero ya antes lo jugaba un chingo. Esta verga es emote extra.
Esa es una conejita.
¿Cuál? No la vi.